There are many legends and myths about California's Disneyland and Florida's Walt Disney World. Some are at least rooted in truth, even if the details aren't quite right. For instance, it's often said wealthy guests can actually book a stay in a secret suite inside Cinderella's castle. Not true, but in the past, people have won contests to spend a night in the castle, which is probably where the rumor originated. Likewise, the popular perception that performers dressed as Toy Story characters have to drop to the ground and remain motionless if anyone yells "Andy's coming" is false. There was once a viral photo of a guest laying on the ground with the characters, but Disney has since officially forbidden the practice, out of concern for their performers' safety and the fact that too many guests started yelling the phrase. Other oft-repeated legends are just downright false. While the idea that the Cinderella Castle in Florida's Walt Disney World can be dismantled in case of a hurricane sounds at least somewhat plausible, it's simply not true. Nor is the more bizarre notion that Disney parks have a special weatherproof dome over them, which, on its face, is obviously less plausible than the castle hurricane theory. And then, of course, there's the king of outrageous Disney myths, that the cryogenically preserved body of Walt Disney, or in some versions of the tale, just his preserved head, is secretly kept underneath one of the parks, waiting for the day when medical science can revive the Disney founder. But one rumor that has garnered a lot of attention in recent years is actually quite true. Guests attempting to scatter the ashes of their deceased loved ones inside the park. This practice is, in fact, a persistent enough problem at the parks. Disney has even instituted a special code employees use to inform each other it has occurred. So, if you're ever at a Disney park and hear an employee yell, "HEPA cleanup," know that you might be in the vicinity of some recently deposited human remains. The HEPA cleanup code refers to a special vacuum filter used to suck up very fine particles, such as human ashes. And this is the irony of this particular practice. While it's maybe understandable some dedicated Disney fans would be intrigued by the theme parks becoming their final resting place, and while their family members may only be trying to lovingly honor their final wishes by going through with it, they're not necessarily giving their loved one an eternal rest in the theme park. It's just as likely their actions will be spotted by an employee or one of the park's many security cams, and the deceased's ashes will soon be sucked up in a vacuum and deposited, well, elsewhere. Still, this hasn't stopped many guests from trying, as employees say human ashes have been spread in the park's bushes, lawns, and flower beds, right outside or inside the park gates, and even on some rides, such as being dumped in the water during Pirates of the Caribbean. But park workers report the most popular place by far for relatives to attempt to scatter their loved one's ashes is inside the Haunted Mansion, the popular dark ride which takes guests through a spooky, ghost-filled manor. In a Wall Street Journal article about the practice of Disney remains dumping, a Disney custodian was quoted as saying, "The Haunted Mansion probably has so much human ashes in it, it's not even funny." Perhaps it's not surprising this is where so many Disney fans would want to spend their eternal slumber, amongst the amusing fictional ghosts that already populate the ride. After all, as the ride's narrator says, the mansion is already occupied by 999 happy haunts, but there's room for 1,000. What would be surprising to learn, though, is if anyone who asked for their ashes to be scattered in the Haunted Mansion did so not because of their love of the ride, but rather their intense fandom for the first movie based on it. A movie that certainly has its fans, but still, is maybe not enough of an enduring classic to inspire the sort of appreciation that lives on beyond the grave. The year is 2003, and only a few months after the mega success of Pirates of the Caribbean, Walt Disney Pictures are ready to launch the next big cinematic franchise based on one of their popular rides, with The Haunted Mansion.
0.
Welcome, foolish mortals, once again to Failure to Franchise, the podcast dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. I'm your ghost co-host, Trev.
And I'm Chris.
Good. Yes, and well, yes, as we say, welcome back to Summer Surprise. And Chris, you know what's interesting is we were kind of criticizing the computer last time for having it out with us with Summer Surprise this time. Trying to really break our will, make us give up on the podcast. But I gotta hand it to the computer or the AI, whatever it is, the entity, whatever.
Yep.
This time I think it feels like it was looking out for us and like looking out for our SEO a little bit. because the randomizer has actually chosen a surprisingly topical entry this time. And that is 2003's The Haunted Mansion from Disney. We'll talk about why it's topical in a moment. Probably people already know. But Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about the 2003 Haunted Mansion?
For sure. It is directed by Rob Minkoff, most famous for directing The Lion King.
Yeah, heard of it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It is written by David Berenbaum. He's most famous for writing Elf. Heard of it? So yeah, a couple of heavy hitters for this one. Budget of the film is $90 million. Domestically, it made $75.8 million, and then worldwide, it made $182 million. So by, the standards of double the budget, in nowadays terms, it's about 2.5 is the multiplier. Yeah. But, this movie did okay. It probably made a lot of money on video release. So that's something that doesn't happen anymore. But video release probably saved this movie quite a bit, actually. So not a huge bomb. Not a huge bomb.
No, I'm sure ultimately this was profitable for them.
Yeah.
But not that the level of profit they were looking for. And this is another one. We've had a few like this recently where, some listeners might think, well, were they really rushing to make more Haunted Mansion movies after this? Like, was there going to be a Haunted Mansion 2 and 3? My argument would be probably, because it is Disney and they love franchises. But more specifically, this is actually a case where the underperformance of this film, to me, as far as I'm concerned, Chris, you can say if you agree, I don't think it put a kibosh on just a Haunted Mansion franchise. I think this actually destroyed a lot of potential franchises for Disney. Yes. Because it changed a lot of what they were thinking moving forward in terms of movies based on theme park attractions.
Well, especially in 2003, one of the biggest movies of the year was Pirates of the Caribbean.
Right.
So all of a sudden Disney says, let's focus on Pirates films. Let's make a couple of those like that franchise. Let's build that thing up. But I know for a fact, actually, there was plans for It's a Small World, and I think there was another plan for another
Thunder Mountain Railroad.
Thunder Mountain, yeah, and that was all canceled after the Haunted Mansion's underperformance. So they just kind of laser focused in Pirates and was like, you know what, whatever, we'll just focus here.
Yeah, because you have to imagine they were probably pretty cocky going into this. Was a November release. So first of all, that's pretty odd. Again, why is it that they never want to put out a Haunted Mansion movie on Halloween? So this is the Thanksgiving release, but Pirates obviously was the big hit the previous summer.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they were looking very closely at this one and thinking, holy crap, if Pirates was a huge hit and now this hits, we're just doing it all, baby. Every ride, Spinning Teacups, the movie coming, 20 or 2005,
Yeah.
Starring Brad Pitt or something, but obviously that did not happen. This did not perform to the level. But as we just said, this is surprisingly topical because, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but this is one of the interesting rare cases for us where we're talking about this movie at the same time that the ultimate reboot of this is now in theaters.
Yep.
And let's just face it, let's not bury the lead. Once again, underperforming.
Yes.
So this is a franchise that just can't seem to get going for Disney, which is actually kind of interesting to me because it is one of the most recognizable, popular rides. So I think we wanted to start there and talk about maybe our history with the ride and what we just think of the Haunted Mansion as a Disney concept in general.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to Disneyland and Disney World numerous times in my life, and the Haunted Mansion is a staple. It is kind of the perfect marriage of Disney Magic and the Imagineering team. Mm-hmm. It's really spooky, but it's approachable. It's made for everyone. You're not going in there to see. I mean, you are going there to see ghouls and ghosts, but they're not gory and gross. You're not. You're actually having a good time feeling the spooky vibe of everything. I kind of want to just go a little backwards for what you just said about the underperforming of the new one, because this kind of leads into what I want to say. This is the 20th anniversary as well for this film, so that was kind of cool that worked out. And you mentioned about this one coming out, like the one we're talking about today, the Eddie Murphy version coming out on Thanksgiving. Well, I did just mention that the ride is very family friendly. So, Thanksgiving is the time that the family gets together, and maybe that's the reason why they chose that. What I do not understand is the Haunted Mansion in 2023 coming out in August.
The only explanation I saw that maybe makes sense to me, and it's honestly one I hadn't considered before, but I'm sure it's the kind of thing that Hollywood bean counters do think about.
Okay.
Because I saw some people say, like, well, maybe it was trying to avoid the glut of horror movies that will be out in October, because we're getting like The Exorcist and Saw and The Nun 2. And it's like, yeah, but this, Haunted Mansion is the family one, right? That would have been counter-programming. But because it's a family movie, somebody pointed out, it might have actually been Jenny Nicholson, a YouTuber we both are fans of, who does a lot of stuff about Disney. I think she's the one who actually mentioned in a tweet talking about it that perhaps they were thinking that during the summer, because that's when you want to release any family movie because kids are out of school.
Oh, interesting.
So kids can go see movies on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday as well, not just Friday night and the weekend. So that might be the thought. Because I've saw the other theory people keep floating is, well, they wanted to release it in theaters during the summer, so it'd be on Disney Plus for Halloween, which I'm sure it will be. But like, who cares? That's not gonna. No one's gonna subscribe to Disney Plus in October just to watch Haunted Mansion. So that logic doesn't really make much sense to me.
But the one about the summer vacation one does check out, in my opinion.
That's the one I think is like, oh yeah, that's probably what they were thinking.
But it's still so weird because I was texting with some buddies about this because we were doing this episode, and right away, like, they all want to see the new one, but they're gonna wait to Halloween, and we got in this big discussion about how, well, listeners, me and Trevor, big horror movie fans, right? We'll take horror movies any day of the week, year long, right? But I think there's a big distinction between horror and spooky season. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think, like, when you go to see the Haunted Mansion in any way, because I watched this one in August as well, and there's something that just doesn't sit right watching a spooky Haunted Mansion movie, when it's plus 33 degrees out Celsius and it's beautiful out. And you know what I mean? It's almost like a weird vibe that it goes in your head. It doesn't really compute, So
I don't know what you mean by the Celsius talk, but otherwise I agree with you.
Well, you are undereducated. I understand. It's all good.
No, same here. Look, I went and saw the new one. We'll talk about it a little bit later.
For sure.
And I primarily did just so that I could have a sense of comparison for this one.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, I probably would have just waited. And there are, as you just said, I'm a huge horror fan. It's my favorite genre. And there are some like interesting horror films that have come out recently or are out now that I'm purposely not seeing because I'm like, you know what, I'll just wait till September, October to watch those when I'm more in my Halloween mode. Like Talk to Me is the A24 horror film that's getting amazing reviews. I'm very excited to see it, but I was like, you know what, I can wait a couple months and watch it when I'm really in my Halloween vibe. So yeah, same with Haunted Mansion. I would have been very excited to go see this in the theater if it was like an October release.
Totally. But me and millions of people go to Disney parks year round and they go to the Haunted Mansion. So like swerving back to the ride, I've gone to this ride. Oh, I don't even countless times. Like I don't even know how many times,
Mm-hmm.
and it is just like I said before, it's the perfect marriage of like Disney magic and family fun entertainment. And I think the optical illusions that it does, and it's just they're kind of burned in your brain. It's kind of a marvel, especially at the time when it came out, or the time that the ride opened.
When Walt Disney and his Imagineers, his guys who designed Disneyland, started thinking about the idea for the Haunted Mansion, it was really early in the history of building theme parks. And all of his Imagineers were filmmakers. They were production designers and special effects guys. So there's a spirit and a style and an approach to the work in the Haunted Mansion that also kind of transcended over into our work on the film.
Whenever I go to Disneyland, that's one of the first rides I want to go to. It's always like the spooky house, and Haunted Mansion is like the definitive spooky house.
It's a pretty magical experience. I absolutely love the Haunted Mansion. I really do.
Which I believe, if we want to just set the pure context, I believe the Disneyland version opened in 1969 and the Disney World version was 71.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Before I talk about my history with the ride, I will just point out something else that was pointed out to me that I thought was kind of funny, where people are talking again about that like weird, decision not to release this at Halloween and to put it out in the summer. Yeah. And obviously everyone was advocating, saying, well, they really should have released it in Halloween. Maybe it would have done a little better. And then somebody did, I believe, correctly point out that, well, the irony of that is that the Haunted Mansion ride in October isn't even the Haunted Mansion fully. Because I think in late October is when they start switching it over to the Nightmare Before Christmas redress of it.
Funny. Interesting.
Yeah. And so, I actually think it'd be hilarious and they're obviously not going to do it now because the movie just bombed. Yeah. But they should re-release the new Haunted Mansion movie in October and do, a Nightmare Before Christmas overlay on the movie and just have, all these Jack Skeletons running through the... just CGI popping up every once in a while.
Nice. I'm sure you could put that in an AI generator now and actually make that happen. So yeah, out there, listeners, if you're good with that, do it.
I've never experienced the like Nightmare Before Christmas overlay or redress of it because I've never gone to Disney World or Disneyland at that time of year.
Same.
But I've watched ride-throughs of it. You know, I don't know about you, Chris. One of my favorite things to do, because I haven't gone to Disney World in a long time, and sometimes I just get nostalgic for it, is I'll watch like the you know, low light or whatever, you know, like high def ride-throughs.
Same. No, I
recapture that spirit.
They're fun to do that. It's fun to do that.
I've watched the Nightmare Before Christmas version, and it always just kind of bums me out. And I think it's like, I wish they only did that for like 2 weeks in December. Like the fact that it's that for like 3 months, it's like, I don't know. This isn't. You're not really getting the full Haunted Mansion experience, and at this point, isn't Nightmare Before Christmas iconic enough to just give it its own ride instead of having to do that?
But then they got to put so many millions into it. They got to ride that Jack Skeleton train until it's truly dead in the ground.
I'm just saying, I think it's the fact that I have read that they actually do it in October, which bothers me, because I feel like if I was in Disney World in October, like around Halloween, and I would definitely like be so excited to do the Haunted Mansion, and then it's like a Christmas ride at that point.
Sure.
You know, that's weird.
I mean, it's kind of like how they redressed the Tower of Terror to Guardians of the Galaxy.
Well, that's not even a redress. That's just a full change. Like,
well, and that's what sucks, is because the Tower of Terror was like, I think, my absolute favorite attraction going to California.
I think it's still the Tower of Terror in California, though, isn't it? Or no, it's still the Tower of Terror in Florida, I think, and California is the only where they changed it.
Okay,
so.
Interesting.
Yeah, my experience of the Haunted Mansion is very similar to yours. When I was younger, my family did a lot of Disney World trips.
Nice.
We did Disneyland once, I believe, when we were in California for the Rose Bowl. But Disney World, we would go like almost every year for a while, because it used to be more affordable for a family to go to Disney World. You know, so there was a period there when I was a kid where we went like every year, every other year. And yeah, I mean, you know me, Chris. We just mentioned it, and you know that I've been a horror nut since I was a kid. So you damn well better bet that Haunted Mansion was my biggest obsession at Disney World. I wanted to ride it all the time. It was like I was like, we'd walk into the park and I'd be like, when are we going to Haunted Mansion? When are we going to Haunted Mansion? Can we walk over to Haunted Mansion?
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty sure I made my parents do the thing where you get off and just instantly get back on the line and ride it again. Got really into, like, for a while, kind of like the mythology of it, you know, knowing like the storyline of the ride and who some of the characters were in the ride. I had that like chilling sounds of the haunted house sort of a record from Disney, and I would play that as a kid and kind of bring back memories of doing the Haunted Mansion. But yeah, everything you said is just so true. There are other great rides at Disney World, but I think that's like one of the top-notch ones in terms of the Imagineering and the effects and just how well it actually, you know, delivers on its concept and its promise. And like you mentioned too, how it's actually fun and actually somewhat spooky, you know, as spooky as you can get for a kid's ride. But there are some moments like that very first part where you're just all gathered in the round room and the paintings go up and suddenly there's actually a body hanging above you. That's pretty rough stuff for a Disney family ride. You know? Oh
yeah, and it's just so simplistic. You know, like sometimes the best scares or the best stories are pretty simple. And creating that ride in the late 60s, you know, early 70s, it's they don't have the tech that they do nowadays, but sometimes you can't beat a classic, you know?
Yeah.
And there's a reason why the Haunted Mansion has, you know, stood the test of time, even through its redressings. But yeah,
and sometimes even if they try, like, because, you know, they got it so right the first time, sometimes they make changes and it upsets people. You know, I know like a change in recent years, well, probably not even recent anymore, but I know a change from when I was a kid to now is like the Madame Leota, the psychic in the, you know, the glass ball, the crystal ball. When I was a kid, that was just a crystal ball sitting on a table with a head in it talking to you. And now the ball is actually like floating, and it's like a little bit more CGI-ish looking even in the ride. And I know that upsets some purists, so they have to be very careful about like the kind of changes they make in terms of, you know, the hardcore Disney fans and how much they will accept the change.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, sometimes Disney adults got to cool it, but yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Well, you just said too, and like I guess that was a perfect segue because you talked about the fact of just the simplicity of the story and the simplicity of the ride, and maybe that's a good way to segue into talking about Haunted Mansion as a movie, because unlike, I mean, Pirates of the Caribbean, I want to ask you this, Chris. I was thinking about this when I was, you know, watching this movie and watching the remake even, or the reboot. Because it's not that different than Pirates of the Caribbean in that the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, which is probably my second favorite one at Disney World, by the way, neither of them really have like a full storyline, right? Like I said, like over time they created like kind of a mythology for the Haunted Mansion, and if you were a really hardcore Disney fan, you could learn who some of the characters were, who some of the ghosts were. That's true of the Pirates ride as well. There were characters within the Pirates ride, but neither had a storyline. But still, with Pirates of the Caribbean, there's something about it where, to me, that's like a more obvious natural transition to movies. Because all you really have to do is come up with any kind of like thrilling pirate adventure story.
Yeah.
And you can like call that Pirates of the Caribbean. You're not limited by anything other than the existence of pirates. Haunted Mansion's a little different because you can say, well, you can just take any ghost story then, right? Or any haunted house movie and call it the Haunted Mansion. Not exactly. You got to like come up with a story, but you also have to make sure there's enough iconography and enough very specific things from the ride. So it's actually a little bit difficult. So I'm not. It's not that I'm surprised they tried to make this into a movie.
Yeah.
But I think they had a bigger task ahead of them than Gore Verbinski and his writers did with Pirates. Do you agree with that?
I do, because you have to really give a reason why somebody's in this mansion and why people will stay. Like why will they go on the quote unquote ride?
If they're not strapped into a doom buggy, as they call it, and being taken for the ride.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, that's kind of a thing with horror movies anyway, right? Like, you kind of got to be somewhat dumb, in a lot of ways. But I think for it to be family friendly as well, and to keep it in the PG rating, Pirates was one of the first, maybe not first, but very few PG-13 films. It was a little bit more adult for Disney, a little bit more adult oriented. I screw that word up every single time we talk on this podcast, but you get it. And you're right, you can just create a fantastical, pirate story in the realm, and you got to show the dog with the key, and you got to show like what the ship looks like, and then the how just like the swashbuckling goes through. It's just kind of like the Pirates of the Caribbean ride is more of a world versus a story that's narratively driven. And yeah, Haunted Mansion, it is kind of telling a story while you're in there, but like you said, you're strapped in a doom buggy with no exit. So I agree. I mean, also think of it this way too. I mean, the Pirates. Not that this is going to be a Pirates cast, but not the porn one. But that'd be something else. That got a sequel, right?
It did, yeah.
Oh well, damn it. Okay, I guess we won't watch that one.
Can't do that one.
But I think
we'll figure out the franchise After Dark, our spin-off show.
F2FAF. I like that. Or I screwed that up. It doesn't matter. Yeah, and even the Pirates mythology becomes so wild, and it becomes so gigantic. And I mean, that first movie anyways is 2.5 hours long, and the Haunted Mansion, the one we're talking about, is 80 minutes. It is brisk.
Well, and you just made a good point that I hadn't even considered, but it does feed into what I was just saying, is that, you talk about how the Pirates franchise as it goes along, even within just that first trilogy, even discounting 4 and 5, the mythology gets so insane and like over elaborate and wide, but that's because their only limitation is the sea, which, hey, that's a lot of the earth, The Haunted Mansion, you're not going to make any Haunted Mansion sequels that aren't in the Haunted Mansion.
Totally.
Right? Like, you're actually locked into this one house. Like you said, like, when you have to come up with why are people staying in the house, what are the multiple storylines that can take place in this house, that's actually pretty tricky. They were biting off a lot here, or trying to.
But, they greenlight it in the beginning of 2002, and, they throw it to Rob Minkoff, the director of The Lion King. So it's supposedly in great, some pretty capable hands, I would say.
And we should point out that at this point, he had also done 2 like live action animation hybrid movies with the Stuart Little films.
Yes, correct. And quite highly regarded too. Like, people love Stuart Little. So love me some Michael J. Fox, obviously. Then they look to Eddie Murphy. So let's kind of talk about Eddie Murphy a little bit here. First of all, quick feelings on the guy. I've always been an Eddie Murphy fan. I'm sure you are as well. He is quite the movie star. He took a break for a while, and maybe we'll get into our feelings about the film, but I think that this movie maybe has bad timing in his career chronology. Because go ahead. No, I was just gonna say in the early 2000s, he was kind of at the top of his game. Like he's Dr. Dolittle franchise. He's got the Clumps franchise. He's got the Daddy Daycares out now, or coming out, and he makes one gigantic misstep with Adventures of Pluto Nash.
Yeah. That's what I was going to bring up, but I kind of think Dr. Dolittle 2 might have even been a little bit of a misstep.
Oh, maybe.
Like,
Yeah, you're right.
Well, that's the point I wanted to make, because you mentioned, like you said, well, I'm sure you're an Eddie Murphy fan too, and I'm like, yes, but I think you always have to put like a little bit of a caveat on that, because the trick of being an Eddie Murphy fan is that you have that amazing early run when he's just unstoppable, right? Like the guy, like one of the biggest phenoms to come out of SNL, and then just becomes one of the biggest comedic movie stars of all time. And I mean, his 80s are just, you look 48 Hours, Trading Places, Beverly Hills Cop 2, Coming to America.
Totally.
You throw in like Raw in there, and it's like, oh my God, this guy's just unstoppable. And then you get into like pretty much the 90s on, his career becomes a lot more interesting and like frustrating. Because it's not that he never has any more hits, because he does. Like every once in a while, he suddenly reminds you, "Hey, I'm Eddie Murphy," right? Like, and he kind of can always come back. But then, I feel like since the '90s, he's never been able to have a sustained, lengthy comeback. It's all like these like crazy peaks and valleys. Because this is just, I'm looking at his like selected filmography right now. But like in the in the '90s, you have less successful sequels like Another 48 Hours. Well, I think that was actually still a pretty big deal. But Beverly Hills Cop 3, and then of course things like Vampire in Brooklyn, which nobody likes. And then suddenly you're like, oh my God, after Vampire in Brooklyn and Beverly Hills Cop 3, is he down for the count? No, in 1996 he gives you The Nutty Professor.
Right.
And then in 1999, he gives you Bowfinger, which is like one of my favorite Eddie Murphy movies.
Yeah.
And then in 2000, he does Nutty Professor 2, The Clumps, which I think was maybe a financial hit, but I also think a lot of people looked at it like, uh-oh. Like, we didn't need that movie. We like Nutty Professor. You might have been pushing it a little too far. And then, like you said, then he has the Pluto Nash, like, that was like such train wreck at the time.
Well, and that was such like that. I still remember, 21 years ago or 22 years ago, whatever it was, the media coverage on how absolutely gigantic of a bomb Pluto Nash was, which is so funny because we're going through a time right now in 2023 where seemingly every major blockbuster is tanking right now, especially the summer. A couple have been huge, but most have been complete disasters. And this is becoming more commonplace nowadays. But when Pluto Nash was coming out, it had this gigantic budget. He was jumping into the sci-fi realm. It was I think it was meant to kick off some other sequels. It must have been, right? So we might even have to talk about this movie.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. So this one was like just heavily bombarded with like the absolute most scathing articles. So this really, I think this, in my opinion, this was the moment where it was like, uh-oh.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I mean. Like, so, and he had Shrek obviously to fall back on for voice work during his time, but he kind of goes in a different direction after like the Pluto Nash, Haunted Mansion, like, all these aren't, but these family films I'm trying to do aren't performing as well. So he does Dreamgirls. Guess what? Everybody's blown away by Dreamgirls. Oscar nomination. So many people think he's favored to win. He, of course, doesn't. But you still go, okay, wow, is this the beginning of a new direction for Eddie Murphy? Is he really going to turn things around and become like this amazing dramatic star now? No, he does Norbit.
Yeah,
and Meet Dave. And so that's what I mean. Like, it's I don't know, it's all these peaks and valleys where every time, every few years or so, suddenly there's a new Eddie Murphy movie that we get all excited about. Like, more recently in 2019, Dolomite Is My Name. And you go, oh my God, yeah, that's right, Eddie Murphy rules. And I feel like he can never follow up like with a consistent track of like a bunch of good movies in a row. So yeah, I like him. I'm always rooting for him. I think he's obviously hilarious, but I think he picks projects pretty poorly sometimes. I think that's the issue.
Do you think the guy is just so mega rich
that he doesn't care? That
he just does not give a fuck?
Could be.
Like does Eddie Murphy? Do you think of Eddie Murphy as an artiste?
The only thing I can say to that is I remember, because I think you probably remember this too, or at least hearing about it, that he seemed very upset that he did not win the Oscar for Dreamgirls. Like, didn't even like leave the Oscar telecast after he lost.
Interesting. Okay. I don't know. I can't remember.
Yeah. So I think he was like really like kind of gunning for like an Oscar there. I don't know. And maybe like the fact that he didn't win, kind of, hurt his feelings. He's like, well, I'm just going to run back to crappy comedy then.
Sure.
But yeah, maybe. I don't know. That's a good question. Looking at his filmography, especially his 2000s filmography, you would think that maybe he doesn't care.
Yeah.
Because he certainly picked a lot of stuff like, like your Tower Heists or your 1,000 Words, or just like, what are you doing? And then even like kind of running back to Coming to America, the sequel, way after he should have, and I don't really know anybody who cared about that sequel. So it's tough to say. You want to think that he's too talented to not care, but he is like a huge megastar. He made his money back in the day. He still has that money probably.
Oh yeah.
Maybe it's just a hobby for him at this point.
Yeah. Kind of like Adam Sandler. Another, mega famous, extremely successful SNL alum that has a frustrating filmography.
Yeah. And they're also both very similar in that whenever they decide to kind of go in the more dramatic realm, it's awesome. Mm-hmm. And you kind of wish they would maybe just like kind of play in that realm more often and stick there. Yeah. I will say the best thing I think Eddie Murphy has done in recent years is when he came back to finally host SNL a few years ago.
Totally.
If you haven't seen that full episode, that was this is very rare for SNL. Every skit was a banger.
Yes.
There was like not a bad one. That was a perfect episode all the way through, and he was amazing. And it really made me kind of like bummed that was his first time back, that he hadn't come back until then. Because it's like, oh man, he should have been like a Tom Hanks, Christopher Walken, Alec Baldwin. He should be hosting all the time. Because it was just great seeing him in that format again.
I forgot about that. That was one of the best.
That's one of the best SNL episodes
ever.
Yeah,
it was so. That wasn't the 50th, right? Didn't he come back for the 50th to do a monologue?
For the 50th, and it was that weird thing where he just came out and said like, "Hi, I'm Eddie Murphy. Anyways, let's go to commercial." Or something. It was like really weird. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, like the frustrating thing with him is you just never know. Are you going to get like good Eddie Murphy or bad Eddie Murphy? And I mean, I guess that's a good opportunity to find out. Do we think this movie falls into good or bad for the Eddie Murphy career?
You are cordially invited to the historic Gracie Manor, where there's room for the whole family.
Hello? Is anybody here? We're the Evers from Evers and Evers Real Estate.
Master Gracie wishes to discuss his affairs over dinner.
This house has a bit of history to it. And this history haunts these walls.
I don't think it's a good idea to put that information on the listing. People love bathrooms. We should play up the whole toilet angle. I think that'd be best.
From Walt Disney Pictures.
What happened here, Mr. Gracie?
Do you believe in ghosts?
No clue from the past.
She looks like Mom.
That's interesting.
No message from the future.
I am Madame Leota, seer of all.
Wow, that's great. What is that?
Can prepare you for an adventure
Find the key that must be found.
That was easy.
from the beyond.
Hey! I'd really rather stay on the ground. Can I stay on the ground, please? Oh! This is no time to panic. Don't panic!
When would be a good time to?
Now stop panicking!
Get ready
Hold on!
With what?
for the ride of your afterlife.
You'll kill us all!
Some of us are already dead!
Eddie Murphy.
Dark spirits from the grave, come forth.
Don't you make no dark spirits come out while I'm sitting. Wait till I leave before the dark spirits come out.
The Haunted Mansion.
Workaholic real estate agent Jim Evers is accused by his wife Sarah of neglecting his family in exchange for his career. So to make it up to her, he decides to take the family on a vacation. Along the way, the Evers family is lured to the mysterious and remote Gracie Mansion, brought there to appraise its value on the market. While doing so, the family discovers the mansion is haunted, and that a horrible curse must be broken in order to leave.
Pretty simple. Simple story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Chris, I'll go first. This was, well, I should just ask first, was this a first time watch for you or no?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, me too. And I was trying to think of why, and I do think that, 2003, that would have been around the time that I could have been very easily swayed by just the bad buzz and coming off of the whole Pluto Nash thing. I probably was just falling into that camp, but like, yeah, this guy sucks now, whatever. Like, I'm not going to bother with it. So I never did, and it's not like over the years I've heard a lot of great things, like convincing me to kind of come back to it. So this is definitely a first-time watch. And I'll just, like, I don't want to say too much about the reboot yet, but I will say, and this is going to kind of give away what I feel about both, is this is what we were talking about before we started, talking about the film itself. It's surprisingly difficult to make a movie of the Haunted Mansion. Mm-hmm. And I think this film shows that off. This was pretty disappointing for me. It's weird to say. I guess I can't say it was disappointing because I never thought it was going to be very good. But I do think there's some clear misses here. Now, it's like physically impossible for me to hate a haunted house movie. That's the thing. And especially like a haunted house movie that's pitched a little younger and is like gateway horror. Guess what? I'm going to give it a lot of allowances. So I'm going to be honest in that, like, I didn't hate this movie by any means. Like, I could get into the vibe of it a little bit. The production design is amazing. There are moments where, when it kind of really ties into the iconography of the ride, I perked up a little bit. But I do think, and obviously have more to say as we get further into the review, I do think there's two problems plaguing this. It doesn't have a Gore Verbinski at the helm. That's a big part of it, right? So I don't feel like there's not like a visionary person behind this. It feels more kind of committee, safe, blockbuster driven. And I also do think this was a mismatch of like concept and star. So I'm not holding this against Eddie Murphy, but I think this is the wrong kind of project to plug Eddie Murphy into. And I even, as we'll talk later, I have an idea about how this would have been a better Eddie Murphy project and probably a better movie. I think he was oddly kind of like restrained and chained into the material here and not allowed to cut loose in a way that I think would have made it funnier. So yeah, it's kind of a dud because it felt, even at 80 minutes, it kind of plods along. It's not as funny as you want it to be. It's never as spooky as you want it to be. I just think it's kind of a bore. So I kind of get why people weren't super into it.
Interesting. I'm definitely warmer on it than you. I thought this was just a nice little family romp. I don't know. I enjoyed it. I liked the family. I liked the production design. I thought it does a really good job at being true to the ride in a lot of the elements of the attraction, but kind of updating it, for 21st century audiences a little bit. There's definitely a lot of misses when it comes to the comedy, of course. A couple of them I actually thought was really, really funny, though, which I will mention a little later. My issue with the movie is more so in the first 25 minutes. And I know 25 minutes of 80 minutes is still a lot, so I get it. So I'm not naive to that. But I think that there's just a severe lack of spooks in the beginning part, right? There's why not have things in the back? Why not play with the background and the foreground? Giving Easter eggs to your audience that is coming to this from the knowledge of the rides, or just adding something like you're saying, a Verbinski touch, right? Like nobody's Gore Verbinski, let's be honest, right? And that was kind of lightning in a bottle to get that film. I mean, to get at least two of them. But yeah, this one definitely feels a little bit more made by committee. I agree. I put that in my notes actually.
It's like a product, right?
Yes, I agree with that. This is not a visionary hand. Rob Minkoff didn't go to bed at night thinking like, oh man, I can't wait to do this shot. I understand that, but the first little bit is just, it's kind of, there's just not enough little jumpy scares and stuff. But when they get to the mansion, and especially with the rotting ghost Eddie Murphy face scare in the mirror, I think it's pretty well paced and pretty fun. And I liked the little simplistic mystery of the curse and being lured there for reasons. And I was into it. I don't know. I really liked the family. I liked Eddie Murphy well enough. I think Eddie Murphy is just, first of all, he has innate charisma, right? And he's just a believable screen presence. So I totally bought him as this family man realtor, that's kind of neglecting them. And yeah, he's just got, he's got that expressive face, the expressive body, language, and he rarely phones it in my opinion. Even during his bad stuff, he's rarely phoning it in. But I think, I like this, and maybe because, I was discussing with some friends. I mention every once in a while me and Trevor a little difference in age here, but a lot of my friends grew up with this one and really, really like it and hold it to high regard. And I never experienced that for reasons I don't know. I couldn't tell you why I missed out on this one. But it seems to have grown with my generation as well, my age group, and it has been kind of passed along to even my friends' kids. You know, like people are having kids in my life now, and it's being the intro. So like you said, gateway horror, which I completely agree with. And it's, I think, one of those gateway horrors that the family can enjoy, you know, all together, you know?
I mean, every generation has those, right? Those movies that the kind of common overall perception of them is that they're bad.
Sure.
But the kids who saw that movie at the time just ended up obsessed with the movie.
Yeah, yeah.
And now they're, you know, and now years have passed and they're adults and they're introducing it to their kids and trying to convince them it's good. And like, they've never really let it go. Heck, we talked about that, you know, to a smaller degree with even something like Surf Ninjas.
Totally.
Which apparently there are people out there who just like wore out their Surf Ninjas VHSs, you know? So it stands to reason it would happen with Haunted Mansion. This is going to be another one of those ones, Chris, where I'm not going to like, you know, passionately fight you on it.
Sure.
Because like I said, I don't hate it. To me, it was just kind of like Dead on Arrival to make a bad, like, kind of Haunted Mansion kind of joke. But a couple things I would say, like, where I do disagree with you on what you said. Like, it's, again, I don't want to be too negative on Eddie Murphy in this because I just think it was a problem of a script that wasn't doing him any favors. But I kind of agree with you that he never phones it in and that he's very, very likable. But I'll tell you, like, what kind of character I don't ever want to see Eddie Murphy play in a comedy is just a regular guy. Like, that's where I think it's like, I don't know, like, that's not the magic of Eddie Murphy. That's not the Eddie Murphy that I think, you know, really comes off the screen and blows you away when he's just playing a real estate agent who has some marital problems. Like, to me, that wasn't enough. I wish he could have been allowed to cut loose. And again, I'll talk about some ideas I had later on. And then I also will say, and this is tough for me because, again, I'm trying to, like, not keep comparing this to the reboot I just saw. And you might already get the sense. I'll just say it now. I'm sure we're going to do that one somewhere down the line, but I don't really like the reboot that much either. But I'll say I slightly prefer it to this one, and I think part of that reason is I think the reboot actually does a better job of feeling like a movie based on the Haunted Mansion ride. So you said that you thought this one was actually doing a really nice job of that. I kind of didn't. I kind of felt like this was more like what I said before our break. I really feel like at times this seemed like I'm sure this isn't the case. I know it's not the case. But it felt like it could have been a previously existing haunted house story about this, like, you know, jilted lover, the fiance who killed herself, this curse in a house, and then they just like put Haunted Mansion on it. I didn't think it like connected to the ride and like had enough of the iconography where I ever felt like I was really watching a movie. Basically.
Really? Like the sphere head, the ghost cemetery, the magical, like the sculpture heads. What are you talking about?
Well, that's what I'm saying. This is what I mean.
It looks exactly like the mansion.
The thing that I was the most excited about was just trying to duplicate some of the stuff that I enjoy so much on the ride. I was a big geek about duplicating the stuff as much as I could.
The technology and the artistry behind the technology really gives us the ability to take original ideas from the ride, anywhere from Madame Leota to the ghosts flying up around to stars in the sky, and really take that to another level where it feels three-dimensional, where they're interacting with the characters.
This is the difficulty of Haunted Mansion, right? Because you can stick in all that stuff, right? You at any point you can go, oh, it's a Haunted Mansion movie, so don't forget to take the paintings that get bigger and stick them in. You can do that, but like the story to me didn't feel as like connected to the ride. Whereas like the new one, again, not a great movie, but it seemed like they were building off of a mythology that felt a little bit more connected to the ride. And definitely coming up with a better, you know, you mentioned, this is one thing I'll give the reboot. We mentioned the difficulty of explaining why the people have to stay in the house. That's actually the actual story of the reboot is why would people stay in the house? Why would they have to stay in the house? Why are they locked into this place? So this one just didn't feel as like well thought out in that manner to me. So
what I like about this one, I really like when kids are involved in ghost stories because they immediately believe. And I think there's a purity to it. You know, children have wonder and imagination and some hopefulness, you know, rather than some adults. And I think it's a nice aspect to family-friendly, spooky horror movies. And I think I really liked that when the family realizes the mystery, and I'm just going to tell it right now because we want to talk about it, but the mystery is the the home, like the mansion owner, like the guy who runs the mansion, is dead, but nobody on the grounds, nobody in the mansion can cross over. You know, they're stuck being ghosts, and until he's reunited with his long lost lover, who was murdered back, 16th century, whatever, and the Evers family is lured here because Sarah, the mom, has a resemblance to what's her name, Elizabeth, and basically that's the reason they're there. And the curse is they have to kind of reunite to cross over. And when the kids realize that there's ghosts here, I loved the dichotomy of them just being like, "Yep, Kate, we're gonna help. We got to do this. We got to break the curse." While Eddie Murphy, the adult, gets to kind of scream and run around for a bit until his children say, "Dad, this is real. We have to save Mom."
Hey, look, come on, look, Daddy's having more hallucinations. Let's go right now, let's go.
They're ghosts, Dad.
They're not ghosts. We're just having hallucinations from that dinner that we ate. It was that chicken. It didn't taste right.
Hey!
Who?
It's not the chicken.
All right, it's not the chicken. It's not the chicken, but we're still getting out of here.
But Dad, we have to help them.
Hey, you can't help the dead, honey. They're beyond help. That's the nature of being dead.
The man's talking sense. Everyone should just keep their noses in their own business.
But Dad, we have to help them break the curse.
Why is everybody talking about a curse? Wait a minute, have you been talking to that crazy green gypsy in the giant paperweight?
Gypsy? He found the gypsy. We've got to go back.
Hey, ho, no back. I'm not going back.
But Dad.
Hey, they had me floating all around the room.
Dad.
Hey, I was strapped to a chair, floating around the room with a marching band chasing me. I'm not going back anywhere. Forget it, Casper.
But Mom's in trouble.
What kind of trouble?
And I really liked that aspect. I thought it really worked for me. It's not very heady, obviously, but. Yeah. But the simplicity of the ride is the reason I like it. So this is a simple story that works.
If you didn't have this stuff open in front of you, though, would you remember those kids' names or really anything about them?
Well, that's a dumb thing to say because people said that about Avatar for 12 years. So I know the Evers family, and I think that's all that matters.
Yeah, I get. But I mean,
do you remember Jake Sully?
Beyond names, though, okay, the kid has a fear of spiders. I remember that. But is there anything about the daughter that stands out? They're just. Because I get what you're saying. I like seeing kids in haunted house movies too, but there's a way to make kids very fun and interesting in movies. I think of the kids movies I love, movies like the Monster Squad or Sandlot or even something like Goonies, and those kids are characters. I think the two kids in this are just kind of like the kids that are in Haunted Mansion. I don't think they're that interesting.
I mean, I guess so. I mean, I'm not saying that this movie's a masterpiece, but I'm saying it's a fun family romp.
But I think that's actually kind of important because I think it is a movie built for kids, right? So I think it would benefit the movie more to have these kids have a little bit more character.
Sure.
Because they're gonna be the connection piece for a large segment of the audience. Right?
Yeah, if you were gonna do it over again, maybe this one has to follow the kids purely. Right, and I don't know if the remake does that or the reboot or whatever.
Well, there is a kid character in the remake who's definitely more charismatic and funnier. He's given more to do. So,
right.
I mean, it's still he's not the main character, but I think it's funny because I'm saying that does it better. It's still it's not a great movie. I just think they had time to think about, and don't get me wrong, there's certain things it does not as well too. But yeah, it's they had time to think about what maybe they could have improved here. So I'll say right now, just to get out of the way, so I don't forget later. My thing with Eddie Murphy in this is so to me, like I said, I just think it's not super fun to me to watch Eddie Murphy just play a regular guy. And yes, he gets to be kind of funny at times when he just gets to freak out and scream and run around. He's got some funny lines. A lot of them are in the trailers for this,
All right, wait a minute. Hold it a second. Now you're telling me this guy is dead, and the only reason we were brought here is because he wants to try to get jiggy with my wife?
Pretty much. Are you upset?
The guy is dead and he's trying to get with my wife. And the house isn't really for sale? Yes, I'm upset.
But this is actually a case, and I wonder what you think of this. This is almost a case where I wish they let Eddie Murphy cut loose even more. And I know you and I sometimes bristle against just completely improv movies. Mm-hmm. But if this movie wasn't too concerned with being a PG, product corporate Disney movie, if they had just let Eddie Murphy really riff on this, I bet you the scenes would have been consistently funnier. Mm-hmm. And I also wish this was a case where Eddie Murphy did play multiple characters. That was his thing for a while, right?
Interesting.
And it would have been really fun if we had Eddie Murphy as not just Jim Evers, because then My like boredom with Jim Evers definitely would have been offset if Eddie Murphy was also playing some of the ghosts in the house, you know? Like how fun, I think that would have been really fun. Like I wish this was actually more of like an Eddie Murphy product, because then you have it like where it's like, oh, it's Eddie Murphy's Haunted Mansion. Here it just feels like it's a Haunted Mansion movie that they stuck Eddie Murphy into because he seemed like a marketable star.
Sure.
But they didn't really let him go off in like the way you want to see Eddie Murphy do. So it feels like a really safe movie for him. I think that's what kind of turned me off on it.
Yeah. Like you got really no disagreement from me there.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, too, is like when I say it would have been fun if he played a lot of the ghosts, that's another issue that I had with it where I just feel like there's not a lot of ghosts in it. Like maybe you're going to disagree, but I mean, we have like the two main ghosts that are like the maid and the butler, and then we have like the Terrence Stamp character, and obviously Gracie's a ghost, but we don't have like a lot of ghosts consistently through the movie, like popping up all over. Like the whole thing of Haunted Mansion, the ride is right. There's 999 ghosts in there, you know?
Yeah.
And you want to see like more ghost action in the movie. And again, maybe that was a budgetary thing. I'm sure it was, you know, especially for the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it gets so locked in on the storyline of these like kind of three central character ghosts that we don't get a lot of the other ones popping up to just terrorize the family or whatever. And this, okay, and then I'll finally say this one last thing because it feeds into that and you can go off. When I say terrorize the family, that is the other thing is, I know I'm like in my 40s coming to it for the first time now, so it's hard for me to say. But even as like a gateway, horror kids movie, I didn't think this was that spooky. I wish it was. I think that is the problem with the PG. I wish they let this be PG-13, just like Pirates, because I almost feel like some of the stuff in Pirates is spookier than this movie. You think of like Barbossa, the first time him and his crew reveal themselves to Elizabeth as ghosts. That's scarier than anything in this movie. So I think that was like a miss too.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the zombie crypt scene is pretty damn freaky if you were a child. I think the design work too of the zombies look awesome. There's all real. It's people in makeup and suits. There's no CGI.
Yeah, it's Rick Baker. It's obviously great.
Yeah, so like I think if I was a kid watching a bunch of I thought that was genuinely had some thrills to it. I think that's probably the best action quote unquote scene of the movie.
Although
is the crypt
again,
scene.
that was another scene where I was like, "What? Why are there zombies in Haunted Mansion?" But
I mean, like, who cares? It's a Halloween movie, but I think there's that, and I think I definitely thought that the mirror gag was really good. I think they make the ghost playful, but so does the ride. I mean, the ghosts are playful in the ride too, like especially when you're leaving the ride and they're sitting in your buggy with you. The ghosts are, I guess, scary, but not really. Like I've always felt that they were just more, I don't want to say silly looking, but they're definitely Disney-fied, And I think that translates well, especially in the cemetery scene and the horse carriage scene. I thought all that stuff was great. The only thing I would have put notes on is because you say that there's no ghosts, there's not enough ghosts, but there was 50, 60 in there when they're all, this whole montage of seeing them, they interact with them, some show up in the carriage, so I disagree there. But I also think that my note on the ghost is maybe some different color schemes. That may be my thing. Like they're all kind of they had this rule in the movie that when ghosts are getting further away from the mansion, they become more ghostly. And the crypt scene is the furthest away from the mansion, so that's why they're dead and zombified. But in the cemetery, they're all blue and illuminated, which looks great, don't get me wrong, and I still think it holds up really, really well 20-something years later. But I think it would have been cooler if there were, some greens and some blues and different tints and different shades. Maybe that would add to the idea that maybe you thought that they were too samey. Maybe that's a little bit of it. But that would be my note. The ghosts are never gruesome or off-putting either, other than the zombies, which makes the zombies that much more freaky. But I liked that too because it was, again, the ride was never. I never took the ride as being scary. I took the ride as being, again, it's approachable. That's the word I keep going to. It's approachable in its spookiness. Even as a kid, I don't think I was ever scared by the ride. I was just like, oh man, that's cool. That's an interesting optical illusion. And I think that's kind of what this does. So yeah, I don't know. I liked the usage of the. I thought it was true to the ride. I know you think otherwise, and I know you've been to the ride many times as well. So it's just funny that it's funny that we're disagreeing on that. Maybe because there's a little bit too much Eddie Murphy comedy. I don't know. Because I thought it was respectful of what we got in that ride.
Yeah, I'm not even saying it's like disrespectful, but I do think you just kind of hit on it there, where it feels to me like it's two different kinds of movies clashing, right? Like, does this really want to be like a Haunted Mansion movie, or does it want to be an Eddie Murphy comedy?
Sure.
And it's not letting itself be enough of an Eddie Murphy comedy to like overpower that part of it. But then, like I said, I think like yes, any time you want to suddenly remind people it's Haunted Mansion, you can take another set piece from the ride and throw it in. But it's all like bogged down by this. I don't know. Maybe it's just that I did not find the whole Gracie, Elizabeth, Sarah story interesting, and so obviously if I'm not into that, that's a pretty big hurdle, because especially in the last act, it just like really laser focuses in on that, obviously because it's the main focus. But I mean, you end up with like a final act that's all about this like, you know, forced wedding, and suddenly the reveal of what really happened, and oh no, Terrence Stamp is actually a bad guy. By the way, for a Disney kids movie, I will say pretty interesting that I from what I can tell, the main thrust of this is that he killed her in the real like past, and did not want his master to marry her because she was mixed race. Which is like, all right, Disney, all right, calm down here. But yeah, so that story just never really hooked me. I think, like, I don't know, it didn't feel like a story. And I'll fully admit, I don't know every bit of like the larger expanded Haunted Mansion mythology that's built out over time. I do know Master Gracie is a character that it exists in that mythology, so maybe this stuff does come from the ride. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just didn't feel compelling enough to like connect me to like what the ride does.
Interesting.
And I do think the ghosts, like, I mean, yes, there's a bunch of ghosts, and like, of course, during the graveyard scene, which I like both movies do, because of course you're going to, because it's one of the highlight moments of the ride. But like, I just feel like the ghosts weren't enough of a consistent presence throughout. You know, it's also interesting. There's a little thing, no big deal here, but both this movie and the 2023 movie do like a weird. I don't want to call it a mistake, but when they go to the graveyard scene. And they have all the graveyard ghosts. Pretty like both movies kind of just port over the ghosts that you see at the ride. But then I'm sure you remember this, Chris. Like when you go into the graveyard on the ride, there's like a caretaker and a dog there, and they're both like really scared.
Oh yeah, right.
And they're like humans, right? And they're scared of the ghosts. And then in both this movie and the new movie, for some reason, they're ghosts too. Like the caretaker and the ghost are just there as ghosts. And I'm like, wait, what? Like just an odd. Like they wanted those characters there, but they couldn't figure out a way to justify suddenly there being like a caretaker and a dog. It's like, what if they're just ghosts too? It's like, all right, I guess.
Yeah, they just didn't want to deal with it. the most lazy answer is probably the truth. But you didn't really like that ending, hey? I like that it was like a nice, happy little ending. I mean, I like that it is hopeful at the end, and you know the ghosts cross over, and the Elizabeth gets to talk through Sarah's body to her lover with the truth. You know, now that's come up, and I thought that was a funny moment too, because when they start to kiss. And then, like, Eddie Murphy's like, "Oh, great!" And then just hold on, wait, you're kissing my wife, you know. And I thought that was
funny. No, there was moments in the climax that were funny. That was a good moment.
Yeah.
I also do just kind of, you know, if I'm gonna talk about the things I liked and be nice, I liked just the general like character, you know, development of Gracie, and that he actually does help Eddie Murphy at the end there.
Yeah.
Like saves him from falling into the pit to hell. Like it's nice that they like say like, oh yes, he was misled into this, you know.
Totally.
Like, that works well enough. So yeah, it's not like I hate it all. I just wasn't super compelled by the overall storyline of it. Like honestly, like to me the best performance in the movie is Terrence Stamp. I think he's great as Ramsley.
Yeah.
Because he's just like kind of naturally scary. I almost like wish he had just been like this like sinister, you know, evil butler through the whole movie, and they kind of didn't play that reveal later, but that's just nitpicky, like whatever.
Yeah, I loved the head sculptures. That was the moment that I laughed very, very hard. I thought it was funny when they just keep singing what's going on, and then Eddie Murphy's getting more and more frustrated.
Down by the old mill stream where I first met
No, I think they said it was an old oak. That's what they said. It's by
By the light of the silvery moon, of the silvery
God,
moon.
look, you sound really
I
good. Your
want
harmony's tight, but we're trying to find my wife, right? I gotta help my wife. She'll be
coming round the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes.
Listen, guys, I'm trying to find a key. I'm trying to find a key.
Where's the key? Where's the key? Where's the beautiful key? Find the key, find the key. Oh, how happy you'll be.
The key that I'm trying to find is in the mausoleum. The key is in the mausoleum.
You left your key in a mausoleum down in Dixie. Dad, there it is. Dad, there it is.
And it's kind of just like this wholesome humor, but I just thought it was funny that they're singing in like what's that word when people when a bunch of, it's like that
Harmonizing?
I guess harmonizing is the word, but it's like when people go into like a hospital room and they're like, well, they tell you that you're sick today and we don't want you to be sick. What is that?
Well, they're kind of like a barbershop quartet.
Barbershop quartet like that. But do you like how I immediately went to, I think that must be a gag from a TV show or something I've seen in the past. Going to like some
Scrubs.
Yeah, exactly.
You're thinking of Ted's band on Scrubs.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking of. Okay, yeah. But I thought that was a nice usage of that gag from the ride. I like that quite a bit.
Now this, and I'm not saying it should be, so don't get me wrong. I'm not like trying to attack you here, but I know you're rules guy.
Yeah.
This isn't a movie where you were worried about rules, clearly, right?
No,
because they don't make much sense in this movie.
No.
Like, first of all, I was not exactly sure why Elizabeth would be turned into a blue orb and not, appear as a regular ghost like everyone else does. So
right.
It can only be seen after the curse is lifted. But I was also thinking in the end, like you said, like, first of all, Disney, if you're trying to set up any sequels to Haunted Mansion, not a great idea to have the movie end with all the ghosts getting to ascend to heaven and the house no longer being haunted.
Yeah,
Exactly. But then the last thing we see in the movie also is like them driving away and like they have like the graveyard ghosts busts that you were just talking about, the singing busts like on the car. I'm like, well, those guys got screwed over. They didn't get to go back to heaven. They were still stuck as these stone busts. What happened to them?
Maybe they chose. Maybe it was like my body, my choice situation.
Yeah, maybe they just loved it, right?
They're making it an honest living finally. That's the sequel. The traveling head sculptures.
We haven't talked about a lot of the cast are kind of like, Marsha Thomason is Sarah. I know she's done some TV work, but not like a huge star or anything, and she's serviceable in this, I suppose. Whatever, the kids are who they are, right? Wallace Shawn and Dinah Spivey is the two main ghosts I talked about earlier. I guess the other like significant cast member we should talk about is Jennifer Tilly,
right,
as Madame Leota. Yeah. Obviously, I think we're both on record as being huge Jennifer Tilly fans, right?
Yeah.
And if you're going to have a character that's primarily voice-driven, good choice. Good choice for
I agree.
Tilly. Yeah.
And she's got that great blend of being kind of that scary voice, but then kind of matches the comedy tone, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what works so well with her in like the Chucky series, right? She's equal parts threatening, but then also kind of lovable, right? So yeah, I like Jennifer Tilly. I thought she was a great choice for this, for sure. Mm-hmm. I watched a featurette on like how they filmed it and everything, and it was cool to see just even the special effects back then. Like nowadays, again, I can't speak to the new one, but I can only assume it's all fucking CGI.
Oh yeah, of course.
And complete fucking Disney Dome on acceleration. But this one, lots of practical sets, lots of props. The lighting was awesome. How everything like illuminates. Speaking of Jennifer Tilly's character, she's in the sphere, right? And even when I was watching it, there's a time when Eddie Murphy's holding the sphere and walking around, and I'm like, man, the lighting looks amazing. And I'm like, oh, I bet he's holding just a lit up sphere. And then in the behind the scenes, that's exactly what he's doing. And it's so funny that the simplest techniques often work the best, right? It's the old school way of doing things. Now it's complete post work all the time. And that's why so much of the CGI looks so bad nowadays and doesn't hold up to 20 years ago. It's because of lighting. They don't do the lighting well enough anymore. They don't do enough practical lighting on sets. And I found that this one really took advantage of that. I thought a lot of the special effects do hold up. There's a couple of wonky ones, but really nothing to sneeze at. I thought it looks really good for a 2003 movie, especially from the junk we've seen recently. It was really well done. Even like when there's the scene where Eddie Murphy's talking to the orb, but like talking to Jennifer Tilly for the first time, and he starts to spin around, and the room starts spinning around him. Well, Eddie Murphy was actually in like a gimbal, sitting there, like not as a stunt person. Like he's sitting on a gimbal that fucking cooks speed wise, and it's flying around, and it's so much more fun. It adds such a, what it does? It adds an amusement park feel, right? Like it's that charming aspect of old school movie making. Movies like this don't get made anymore, and when they do, well, you just watched it, and it doesn't sound like it's great either. So, yeah, at least I found there was charm to this, which I'm gonna go on record probably thinking that there's not really a lot of charm in the new one.
I mean, I absolutely agree with you with that. Like the special effects hold up. Like
yeah.
it's a fun way to like look at in that regard. Of like you said, some of it's dated, but we don't care if it's dated if it's kind of fun and it makes you nostalgic for like that era.
Yeah.
I said earlier, I do think the production design in this is awesome. I love the sets. Like the house looks great. Yeah, I mean, you're right that the new one is like all CGI, of course, and there's probably it feels like a little less special, even though it does. Again, like I'm not saying I'm not here to proselytize it and say I loved it, but I do think some of the things I wish had been in this one are in the new one, like more ghosts and like a little bit of like a slightly more genuinely spooky tone at times. But yeah, I mean, still it's like all CGI, and I will say. So that I'm not always just saying, "Oh, the reboot did it better." In terms of Madame Leota, Jennifer Tilly is like way better in that part than Jamie Lee Curtis is in the new one. So that's a definite miss in the new one that I think was handled better here.
It's a movie about trauma. It's a movie about trauma. The movie is about trauma.
So yeah, no, I love like the look of this movie. I do wish maybe it was just a little darker. Like you mentioned the lighting. Sometimes I think it is a little overly lit for like a spooky haunted house movie. But whatever. As you were talking though, I did start to realize because you were mentioning like the Eddie Murphy and the chair spinning gimbal thing, and I did realize it's been a while since I watched this one actually. Sometimes I watch this like right before we record, but because I knew I was going to see the new one, I watched this a little earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So I was actually kind of forgetting some of it, which again, because I wasn't super into it. But I do think maybe that what I'm butting up against here is that for me, and again, this comes to my, man, I wish they'd let Eddie Murphy do more and play maybe more characters or just riff more, is that I do feel like once you hit like the halfway point of this movie, all Eddie Murphy has left to do is kind of like scream and like run away from ghosts. And I guess like if you can get into like the vibe of that and like find it funny, maybe it is consistently funny. Mm-hmm. It stopped being funny to me, and I think that's ultimately where my problem with this movie is. Like, so I'm agreeing with you. Like, production design's awesome. It looks cool. It's nice to see some of the the nods to the ride and everything. But like, I know this is supposed to be a comedy, and I know it's supposed to be an Eddie Murphy comedy, and I just didn't find it funny. I found it more grating in like the second half because I'm just watching him consistently scream and run away. And I'm like, that's not the best usage of Eddie Murphy. I know he can do funnier stuff than just that. Does that make sense? I mean, I know you like the movie more, but like, yeah.
I mean, I think it does. I think there's a bit of maybe. I'm not trying to sound like bad or anything, but it maybe just you're so laser focused and stuck on the Eddie Murphy of it all. And I don't know. It's like
it's hard not to be, right? That's what happens when you cast such an iconic actor
for sure.
Stick him in the and like because this is an Eddie Murphy movie. Right?
I know,
like you said, he was at the height of his powers at this time. So
I guess so, but I guess it's like just because he wasn't doing what you want him to do doesn't make it a piece of shit.
No, I agree with that. I don't. Right? I try not to like review the movie I wanted to see, but like I'm saying, like what the movie is giving me, I don't think is very funny. Like that's the problem. I just don't find. I would not put this in like the top 10, top 15, maybe top 20 Eddie Murphy movies. Yeah. I don't think he's doing anything here to like save this movie.
I guess the question is, do adolescent preteens like this, right? And then I start to think of the millennials that did grow up with this one and did enjoy it, right? And it's like, I guess, as an age of ours, yes, it doesn't necessarily hit what we think is funny, but sometimes this isn't made for us.
Yeah, but if we're going to start like giving allowances and saying any movie that kids liked at any time is good, we're going to really have a problem.
No, I get that.
Kids are dumb and like love everything. So
yes, kids are dumb, but not. I think I kind of, as I get a little older, I do push back on that a touch. I don't think kids are as dumb as we say they are. You know, we talk about that when it comes to horror as well, right? Like kids can get scared. They like to get scared. You know, they can handle a lot more than we give them credit for. And, you know, I think a lot of fucking adults are dumb. I would say most of them are dumb. So I don't know. I don't know if we can make that delineation as much as we.
Yeah. I mean, but let's
do.
also be honest and like, I mean, look, obviously it's impossible to quantify this exactly.
Yeah.
But let's not pretend this movie became another Hocus Pocus or anything, right?
No.
Like, I don't think this movie had, like, I don't think kids were super into the movie at the time necessarily, a lot of them. And I mean, obviously any movie, like a lot of movies, like we said, at this time, of this time will have their fans.
Sure.
But I don't think this movie's developed that intense of a, you know, cult following that's coming to its defense very, very strongly. So I don't know who the audience was for this. I'm sure there were some kids obviously who caught on to it and maybe liked it because of the Eddie Murphy stuff or just like the spookiness of it. But I don't think this had a huge second life.
Right. And I don't know. I like to tack up a little bit more of that to its placement and even Eddie Murphy's career being kind of not, I don't want to say forgotten about, but it's just bad timing. I mean, I don't know. It comes after his mega bombs, and then, you know, Shrek takes over, right? So kind of Haunted Mansion gets lost in its wake a little bit.
Yeah, and it's also just very easy. I think because the idea of taking a theme park ride and turning it into a movie is kind of cynical and silly on its face.
Yeah.
And like the story of Pirates of the Caribbean is like, holy crap, somehow they actually got it right, you know? So like if there's just a bad Eddie Murphy movie, there's just a bad Eddie Murphy movie. But I think probably what people look back on this one as, because I know I'm guilty of this as well, is like, oh, what a dumb decision that was from Disney. You know, what a misstep to make that movie.
Sure.
And so I think like people who saw it and didn't like it, probably that has like grown in their estimation over time. And people who haven't watched it are just like, I'm not going to watch that crap, that dumb, you know, Haunted Mansion movie that they made with Eddie Murphy. That was probably a bad idea from the get-go. So
what it did make me lament, though, I will say this, especially seeing, you know, the Gothic style, the kid-friendly Gothic style. It did lament, for me, the dead Del Toro version.
Yeah.
Big time. And
when I talk about the reboot, that's the real case there, where you go like, this is the movie they chose to make instead of letting Guillermo del Toro make his. You know?
Totally. Like I can only imagine. Like I've seen the trailer for the new one like once, I think. And I'm sure we will talk about that movie someday. Not anytime soon. So I'm sure I'll forget this conversation. But you know, Del Toro's version of the Haunted Mansion, you know, ultimately did become the masterpiece that is Crimson Peak, which is nice for him to get that out of his system a little bit. But yeah, it sucks that we're saddled with in my opinion, an okay Halloween movie. And, you know, whatever the new one is, which, you know, you say this one's product. I mean, I'm sorry, but you got to say the new one's product too, right?
I mean, yeah. Totally.
It is too.
I mean,
it is, right?
I just said, like, I just like
it's
look.
Crazy.
I don't like either of these movies. I just think the new one's. I just think the new one is slightly better. Like the new one is. This one to me is like a 2 out of 5. The new one's 2.5. Like
right.
That's my difference. You know.
That makes sense.
And I will say, like, I think the new one is even like more frustrating at that end though, because I do think you're seeing remnants of like what Del Toro wanted to do. I mean, I was at Comic-Con the year when Del Toro came out and announced that, and like his whole thing was he's like, well, my Haunted Mansion movie is going to be about the Hatbox Ghost. You know, I love the Hatbox Ghost, and that's what my movie's going to be about. Well, guess what? The main villain in the new movie is the Hatbox Ghost.
Interesting.
So it's like, oh, you know, like they took like whatever he was developing, they kept, right? And they just like dumbed it down. And sure enough, what I've read, and it seems like no one's disputing this, is that Disney got worried that the version he wanted to make was too scary.
Yeah.
And to them, I just say again, it's like, you idiots, it's the Haunted Mansion, you know? And yes, Chris, you're right that the ride isn't super scary, but the ride's not the movie, right?
Sure.
If you're going to take that ride and turn it into a movie, I know we've said this before, kids do like to be scared. Kids want to be scared. And anytime you as a studio, like, fret about that and say, like, no, it should be, like, PG and it shouldn't be that scary, you're actually dead wrong. Your movie's going to do way better, kids are going to like it more, and everyone's going to respond to it better. If you let a visionary like Del Toro come in, make a movie that's actually kind of scary, it's still going to be funny. Del Toro knows what he's doing, you know? And just take that and say, like, no. Instead, we'll turn it into, like, this movie full of product placement and, you know, tons of just, you know, simplistic CGI ghosts. It's obviously, we missed out on something really special there.
Yeah, definitely. You know,
for me, go ahead.
I was just going to say, a kind of Haunted Mansion-esque, kid-friendly ghost movie, Casper. I fucking love Casper. Do you like Casper?
Yeah. No, but I mean, I
Oh,
agree
wow.
with you that it's,
Now you've just lost so much of our audience because you don't like Casper?
I don't like. Again, just
Oh
I
my
wasn't,
God.
I wasn't the right age when it came out. But before you cut me off and try to turn our listenership against me,
No, they've turned a long time ago.
I think Casper is more interesting and more fun than this movie than the Eddie Murphy Haunted Mansion.
Oh yeah, Casper's amazing. I fucking love
Casper makes like weird decisions, right? Like Casper kills off like the dad halfway through the movie, you know, and like, turns him into a ghost and stuff. That's what's missing for this movie is like again, or I mean, it's not necessarily missing, but this movie could have been more fun if they had taken big leaps like Casper's at least willing to do, or an out of nowhere Clint Eastwood cameo. Come on. That Clint Eastwood hated doing, and he probably only did as a favor to Spielberg.
Yeah. I hope your Casper hate gets to Christina Ricci, and then she officially hates you and never wants to meet you.
Christina Ricci has also talked shit about Casper in recent years, so I think I'm okay.
You son of a bitch.
She's talking about how it's like actually kind of, she's like, this movie's really weird and like problematic because of how old Casper is, and he's like creeping on me as a little girl.
Get over it.
Now you've turned on her.
So tired of this shit. Fuck, I'm so over it.
I know. I know you're going to disagree with this because I know, like, and also you're like the only person I know who hated it this much. But like to me, like the best piece of Haunted Mansion media is the Muppet one that they did for Disney.
Oh yeah, that piece of shit. Yeah, I know.
I think that's good.
Yeah, it's complete green screen afterthought. Yeah, I know.
It's green screen, but like the jokes are actually funny. Like the humor works. Like the characters are fun.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I don't know. This one was yeah, I just liked it. I don't know. It's hard for me to go bigger than what I've already said about it. Again, not amazing. You know, not gonna enter my annual Halloween. Oh, not that many things do, but not to enter my annual Halloween viewing. But I think
Ernest Scared Stupid.
Yeah. That one's burned into my memory for sure. That one has always been burned into my memory. That was troubling as a kid. Watching when all the little what is it they do again? They kind of make the people
turn the kids into like wood. Like
yeah,
wood
that was
figures. Yeah.
That was creepy as hell.
And those trolls are like legit scary too.
Yes, they are. Would you have wanted? Like I know, obviously, I mean, I know the answer to this question, but if there were to make another one with Eddie Murphy, like. You just want him to be more Eddie Murphy, or do you want them to just move on to a different family? Like I know the mansion is de-haunted at this point, so that's a big problem.
I don't know what the sequel to this movie is, honestly. But yeah, like I said, I really do think. I think I would have been more into this if it was more of an Eddie Murphy.
You know, it'd be great. Here it is. I just found it. I just came up with the idea. Okay, they have the deed to the mansion, right? Mm-hmm. And then our characters are dead. Okay, so now the new one flashes forward in time. You know, let's say, well, however many years, you age up the kids, obviously, because you don't want to make it seem like the kids died young, right? And then Eddie Murphy can be all the ghosts.
Yeah.
Eh?
Well, I think, yeah, sure. Or, like, the secret of this is, like, maybe you don't only let it lie entirely on Eddie Murphy's shoulders. Like, it could have been, like, this could have also been, like, an ensemble piece. Right? Like, that's one thing, again, whether they were successful or not. I like that the idea of the new one was, like, well, let's not just put one person in the mansion. Let's put... like Keith Stanfield in there. Let's put Danny DeVito in there. Let's put Owen Wilson in there. Let's put Tiffany Haddish in there. It's like, okay, now you're building up this like fun cast of characters. I think, again, you said you like the stuff with the kids and the wife. Sure, but like Eddie Murphy is such this kind of like comedic powerhouse that he's going to overpower the other characters. What if like the wife was like funny too, you know? And what if the kids were allowed to be like a little bit more funny? So if it was like a little bit more of like an all-star cast thrown in there with him, no offense to Wallace Shawn and Dinah Spivey, but it would have been cool if there was like other like really, really funny comedians in here along with Eddie Murphy too. For sure.
I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess the last thing I'm going to ask you, Trev, is, can you whack it?
Can I whack it?
Can you whack it?
Is this a line from the movie that I've already forgotten?
Yes. I'll place the clip right here.
Okay.
You take it and you whack it. Go on, whack the spider.
I don't want to whack it.
Come on, you gotta whack the spider, Mike. Whack it.
Dad, I'm afraid of spiders. I can't whack it.
You're my son. You whack that spider. Come on, whack it.
I can't whack the
Yes,
spider.
you can.
Dad.
Come on, whack it. Come on, you can do it. Whack the spider, son.
I don't want to whack it.
Yes, you can. Come on,
I
whack
don't want to whack it.
Well, kill the spider.
I can't whack
Kill the
it.
spider.
Dad, I can't crush it. I can't whack it. I can't do it.
Hey.
There. Happy?
No, I'm not happy, Megan. I was trying to make a point to your brother about how it's important to whack your own spiders.
See what I'm saying?
I can't even set you up for jokes. Oh my god, your memory.
Hey, I remember good movies.
Well, that'll do it for
not this 14% on Rotten Tomatoes nonsense.
That is nonsense. 14%, but a bunch of curmudgeon-y old men like you. Old white men.
What I'm saying is,
we say.
I was there when they opened the Haunted Mansion in 1969, and this movie.
You are actually the groundskeeper. That's so crazy. You're the one with the dog. Yeah.
That's why I was so upset that they keep changing that character.
Well, that'll do it for the Haunted Mansion 2003. In years to come, maybe we'll look at the new one, but we're in no rush.
We will.
Yeah,
well, I'm in no rush.
No rush.
I just saw it. I can wait a few years.
Yeah. But we are continuing Summer Surprise next episode with the final installment, actually. And it is Artemis Fowl from 2020. Available on Disney+. So we'll be watching it.
Can't get away from Disney+.
Can't get away. And definitely tune in to that one. I'm looking forward to that conversation quite a bit. And we got a lot planned in the fall. That's going to be really, really cool. So definitely listen to Artemis Fowl, because then we'll give you what's going on in the fall. And you definitely do not want to miss that.
Quite the ride. Speaking of Haunted Mansion at Disney World.
Yeah. Oh, my God. It's going to be something.
Quite the ride for us in the fall.
So follow along at F2FPod. That's at F2, the number 2FPod on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. Just give us a star rating, whatever you deem necessary on this ride you've been on with us.
Yeah, please don't hold it against me that I don't like Casper. Don't give us 1 or 2 star reviews. I was just kidding. I love Casper. Casper's great.
And join the tribe and hit that subscribe. And we're gonna have a lot of fun next episode, and many more to come. So
can I keep you? Isn't that what he says? Isn't that what Casper says to her as she's sleeping? Isn't that what 100-year-old Casper says to 12-year-old Christina Ricci? This problematic film.
Oh, I just thought you were describing your autobiography just now.
Hurry back. Be sure to bring your death certificate. If you decide to join us, make your final arrangements now. We've been dying to have you.